All right, it's Wednesday, April 12th. This is an end of the day SPY recap, and today we end up with a red 3-bar, meaning we took out the high the previous day and the low of the previous day. We started up above the high. We immediately started lower, reached the halfway point of that bar from yesterday, which then projected down to the lows of that bar, and we got there, and then we kind of closed near the lows of the day. So going into tomorrow, this is the third day of the week, when you see a big 3-bar, it's not really an actionable signal up or down, but you do expect the lows to at least be tested. Given the fact we've talked about how now we're in this big trading range here that's going on for days and days and days, up, down, up, down, up, down, it's certainly possible we just kind of head down and take out the lows of that range. And then at that point, you want to see whether you fail and start back up or continue. We would note that on the daily chart in some form. We talked about how on this big up move, even though you had one pullback here towards this fair value gap, there are other gaps here to fill. So it's certainly possible we could be heading lower. But again, we don't have the actionable signal other than the fact we expect it to probably try a little lower to this level and then see how structure unfolds from there. On the weekly chart, you kind of have a 2-up failed week unfolding with 2 days to go. You just took out the highs of that week. We got to back to the midpoint, and now we're closing with looks like a shooter bar, but you don't know for sure. I mean, we still have 2 days to go. It's still a green week. Maybe tomorrow we start up and close a little bit green. So it's kind of tricky to really project what's going to happen other than you get a little rejection here on these highs, and you expect it to try a little lower first. On the monthly chart, we're now back to red. We're right near the open, so it's not as if the month is a big failure month yet. If we come to the end of the month and we close red, then we would expect the next month to go lower. But right here in kind of the middle of the month, anything could happen, and we're still biased actually to the 2-up reaching here eventually. So we're still going to look for a reversal to the upside, but we might have to kind of, as the market does so often, take out some stops on the downside first before we reverse higher. So we'll look for that. In terms of tomorrow, the only thing that could really happen to get it up is we start above the midpoint of this day and start higher. I'll go to the structure today in a minute and show you why the down side was kind of the bias. But in terms of tomorrow, if we start up and above the midpoint, then we could head higher. We could start down here, fail, take out the lows, maybe hit these levels, and then come back up through the midpoint of that bar. That could be an upward thing. Or you might just get the classic signal, which would be a 2 down bar on Thursday. And maybe then by Friday, let's say we come down and close with a bit of a hammer bar, then on Friday you can have the 2 up. And that would be the strongest signal towards the end of the week that the next week is really continuing higher in line with the monthly chart that's still projecting up here. But if this weekly chart wants to get end up with a 3-bar to the downside into this gap area, well, even the actionable signal on let's say we get a 3-bar down here by the end of the week, and closes red, you might end up with a little pullback here to start the next week, and then have a 2 down, 2 up into the end of the month, so on a weekly basis. So there's a lot of things to keep in mind, but the choppiness is kind of not surprising given we've kind of addressed that here in this daily chart. And the main thing is we had the CPI number this morning that, had a big run up right out of the gates, but then by the time the market opened, we were kind of drifting back to the middle of this range. It was a big range. Blue bar, if you look at the blue lines, a big pre-market range outside of this little bar yesterday. We were opening up somewhere above the high of yesterday, but in the middle of the range. And in order to really get a good up signal, you got to get a green bar that really goes above the pre-market highs. That's the main thing I'm always looking for. So in this case, we started right down, out of the gate, and I bought some puts here. I discussed that. You had a little bit of a pause here, and then we ended up taking out. Once I saw this first bar down, it kind of looked like, given this big action and given the fact we couldn't start right up, we were probably going to try to take out these pre-market lows and the low of this bar here at the end of yesterday, and then that equated to the midpoint of yesterday, which then projected to the lows of yesterday. So at that point, we had our kind of push down, pause, then we reached our target. Not surprising that given the fact you've just broadened out a little bit from the prior day on this 1-2 move, you got a little bit of a pullback, but it really wasn't an up type of a situation to go long. And then again, not surprising at all that the market at some point decided to roll over and close. You didn't know where it was going to close. It could have closed in here, but it closed much weaker. But the big move here was early in the day to the downside, is a classic morning directional move. Other than that, it was a little tricky, but none of this is really surprising. And now we have to kind of anticipate a little lower and kind of see, we're going to target this area here to take out the lows of the week, given how close we are and the follow through that's expected, and the fact price typically likes to broaden out, before it eventually moves in another direction. So we'll look for that. But you never know, given this 3-bar, what's going to happen. As always, we're going to have to wait for the opening price action tomorrow, and then where the pre-market range is, and kind of see where it takes us. But if it starts lower, anticipate taking that out. And who knows, maybe we have to, on the weekly chart, get a 3-week to the downside. Then that ends up with kind of a 2 down into next week and a 2 up, kind of some kind of reversal. But for now, we'll just kind of see what unfolds towards the end of the week here. A little tricky to predict it, other than we're in a trading range and seem to be heading to the bottom of that range right now, and we'll go from there.